Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. This is a continuation from my previous Connecting the Dots with Sarah Bourque, Aging life care professional. I should know that because I call myself a life care counselor, which again, nobody understands what that means. Yeah. But we touched upon that.
Yes. we used to be called geriatric care managers prior to when I became an aging life care professionals. But we really will, it's not just the geriatric population that we work with. Right. So we've the association tried to broaden the description of what we do.
Well, I think that's wise, because I think anytime you're talking about older adults or elders or seniors, a part of the population says, or geriatrics, that's not me.
That's not me.
That's not me.
I'm 85, but I'm not old.
I'm not old. It's those old people in the senior center.
Yes, exactly.
I just think that's very human.
Yes. It also allows us to work with younger people with chronic illness.
Exactly.
So there are some people who fairly young, 40s, 50s, 60s, will develop chronic life-limiting or potentially life-limiting illnesses, and they're a population that we can support as well.
I would imagine that's the dementias.
Some of the dementias, but even sometimes when people get diagnosed early with Parkinson's
or MS,
ALS,
even
psychiatric illness. That can really, substance abuse, psychiatric illness can be something that needs chronic support.
You're making me think now, what about long COVID?
Certainly could. It's nothing I've thought about, but it would make sense.
Because I'm thinking that I've been listening intently to, I'll admit I'm a National Public Radio junkie, but younger people having long COVID and talking about how debilitating they were, runners, and now they have trouble because of the chronic fatigue, working or working out. And again, I think this goes back to the box that I talked about before and the compartmentalizing things. And I would also, I'm just going to, before I toss it back to you, the same thing with vision loss, or I would imagine hearing loss, because you could develop those sensory challenges from a much younger age, and then it be, literally fallen by the wayside. And again, I promise I will turn it back to you. But my journey, my blindness journey, is 15 years in duration, and I have a progressive disease. So again, I didn't know. Just like you said earlier, with the aging life care professionals, I didn't know anything about the blindness culture, or who the players were, or who the participants were. And I've only learned that over time, and again, being curious and exploratory. But a lot of people are just plunged because of an injury or an illness. Having a spinal cord injury, a car accident, and now you're a foreigner in a foreign land, and you don't know whom to trust. So going back to who can you liaison with without feeling, oh wow, I made a mistake, and now I'm being railroaded down this corridor where people portrayed themselves as knowing and they didn't know, and now I'm too far down the line.
Right.
I don't know if I gave you some red meat there.
Well, I'm thinking that, I think of us as care managers as sort of guides. Mm-hmm. So while we may not know the exact way to manage every single thing, we're outside the box thinkers, we're researchers, mm-hmm. we have resources among other care managers in the Aging Life Care Association, and also other resources in the medical community, support community. So we will figure it out, and we will help people figure out how to manage this new club that they've joined that they didn't ask to join in most cases. Our goal is always to give people the best quality of life. And I think sometimes people get very in a box thinking about the best quality of life means so-and-so has to live this way and we have to do these treatments and things like that. And that may not be quality of life for that individual. So it's really listening to the people, trying to figure out what they define as quality of life, and then trying to be creative about how to create that for them.
Would you just give us like I hate to call it a typical client, but anybody that comes to mind? Because when you said like plugging up, you said listening, but I think oftentimes people plug up their ears, or if it's a family member trying to help a parent or an aunt or uncle, the family member may be pressed for time, and they either want to overindulge, or they just want to shove it to the professional. Does that resonate?
It does to some extent. I mean, I find that when family members are willing to work with an aging life care manager, even if they want to sort of shove it to us to take care of as, peace of mind, or they don't have time, I think that that's okay, because we become like family. So we really work with the client about, what they want, try to create that, and communicating with the family members who are involved to make sure that, is it affordable? Is this plan reasonable for the long term? But I feel like people who do that, I would prefer people to do that than to feel burdened or not do it. I mean, that's where the elders or the clients become at risk, is if a family member is, needs to be there supporting and they can't be, either from distance or time or life circumstances. If there isn't someone looking out for that person,
it can fall through the cracks.
It can fall through the cracks. I mean, it's the time that falls happen, or they get ill and nobody knows about it, or nobody knows for several days. So that, I like when caregivers know their limits and will share that with us so that we know how much or how little. Sometimes caregivers are really involved and they really just want guidance or a sounding board. Right. I found this. Does this sound like a good program? Is there another one like it? And we'll just give them the information and they'll run with it. Sometimes people say, I have 4 kids, I work full time, and I just don't have time to see her every day like she would like. What can we do? And then we create a plan that way.
I'm wondering, with your background in psychiatric nursing, the dynamics, between the caregiver and the care recipient, do you recognize certain trends of, this is what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I don't think it's unique to my psychiatric background, really. I think it's, I think care managers often are very good at family dynamics. Social workers are definitely trained in that. I was as a psych nurse. But really recognizing how they communicate with each other, how they support each other, what the needs are, and trying to help people find a middle ground. And I have a client right now, and this was when I was talking about the 4 kids and full-time work, and I think that my client would love for her son to visit every single day for a couple hours, just hanging out. And it's just it's just not realistic.
Right.
So she ends up doing things like calling him frequently during the week with this thing's broken, or I can't find that. Could you just come over and fix this? So I have talked to him about and tried to work with him about trying to set up plans where she knows she can anticipate that he's going to come. I have taken a lot of those. My cell phone isn't working. Well, it's because you forgot to charge it. So, trying to sort of take care of some of those things that, because she's forgetful, are issues, to take those off the plate so when he can go there at a lot of time, it's really about mother and son. It's not about fixing or caregiving. I mean, I often will talk to people about my goal is to make the son, the mom, have family time, and not always be managing crises or mini crises.
Right. Typically, well, how do people find out about you? Where are the referral source? And typically, is it? I'm probably going to answer my own question. Is it a family member who just, again, they've thrown up their hands? It's like, we've tried everything. Mom moved in, or we relocate.
Right.
Again, so how do people find you, and what is typical?
So
is there typical?
There's a pattern. So let me first say, how do people find us in a very big sense? People can find us by going to the aginglifecare.org, which is the Aging Life Care Association website. There is a Find an Expert button. It's a little red button up at the top, and you can do it either using a zip code or a town, or if you've heard sort of a general name, you can put that in. It'll give you a readout or a list of care managers in that area. There are care managers across the country. So, if you happen to be in Worcester and you're actually from California, you can find care managers there too. That's one of the ways that people can find us. Often people hear about us either through friends, word of mouth. Sarah was great with my mom, and your mom's in the same situation. Call Sarah, she can help you. Elder law attorneys sometimes will refer us when they are working with a client or a family system, and there's a lot of back and forth, disagreement among kids or between kids and the parents. They might refer us then. Sometimes assisted livings will refer to us. If someone moves in, they're having trouble adjusting, or it's someone who was very independent who is now starting to have trouble remembering to take their meds or getting to appointments. They're calling and being brought to appointments that don't exist, and they're missing other. We might get referred in that case to help coordinate the care and support the change in capability. Where else do we get? Occasionally we'll get referrals from a doctor's office.
You're saying that as though it's
not,
rare.
It's rare, and I don't understand why, quite honestly.
Right.
The primary cares come in, and the clients go into a primary care doctor, and they have to be seeing. I realize it's just a short snapshot, and often people, for example, with dementia, are able to cover very well. Yes. At least in the early stages. But I feel like a primary care would recognize some of those changes and might suggest a care manager to help support, or, to the family, if there's family involved that's bringing the person to an appointment, that this is a way, and the child is exasperated with mom or dad. I would think that there would be more referral. Sometimes financial planners will do that also. Generally, people come to us when either there's a new diagnosis or things stop working well. Often children do find us. I think either they look online, or they talk to a friend, or they call a doctor or call a friend and say, what do I do? I just came in from California. Mom was telling me she was fine. All I found was tea and toast, and she hasn't taken meds in a month, and the apartment's a mess. What do I do now? So that's another place sometimes that people, or support groups. Sometimes I'll get referrals from through a support group leader.
Like for particular diagnoses like Parkinson's or
it might be
MS
through Parkinson's or one of the Alzheimer's Association support groups, or even just a general caregiver support group. I think that when the leaders hear somebody's really struggling, or they sound more frazzled or more confused or frustrated, that's the time when they might suggest a care manager. Our ideal person would be early on, maybe a new diagnosis, or just, hitting some milestone and saying, I just want to plan ahead, what might be coming up. And then trying to put things in place proactively, take up the throw rugs before the fall happens.
Right.
Put in the grab bars before there's a fall in the bathroom.
And again, I think you get people like, I don't need that,
Exactly.
and you're insulting me by, coming in and rearranging, making sure that, the bedroom is on the level where the bathroom is,
Exactly.
You're rearranging. Yes, this sounds all very familiar to what but again, I think oftentimes family members or even the recipient of the care, they're like, fix it, turn it, fix it. And I think that bleeds back into, this is a process and our bodies are not meant to perpetuate, eternally.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So just getting beyond that, like I'm not ready. It's not time.
Right.
I'm at the beginning stages. I'm not that bad yet.
Right.
That's overcoming that.
Right. And sometimes a lot of our work is educating people on what the trajectory might be, and what the trajectory might be if you continue this way versus trying this option versus trying this option. And also, and this actually goes back a little bit to our conversation about the MOLST and CPR and things like that. One of the things that is important to me when people are making those decisions or having those conversations is that they understand what that really looks like. CPR was developed for young people who had a sudden cardiac event. It was not developed for an 80-year-old, 75-year-old woman with fragile bones. The likelihood of a intact, really good survival back to baseline is actually pretty low. I can't remember the specific numbers, but it's pretty low. But the likelihood that you're going to break a rib and maybe puncture a lung, that's pretty high.
Wow.
So really helping people understand, or what dialysis means.
Right.
Or what a feeding tube looks like. Is that the life that people want to live? Obviously, I'm a lot about sort of end of life planning.
Right,
so but back to those things again.
But I think, and again, this may be interpreted as graphic, but I know I personally, I don't want anything extraordinary. I don't like needles. I don't like, pulsating things, or when my dad died, and both of my parents were from Worcester, and my mom came back to Worcester to live with my husband and me, and at the end of her life she got an infection. She was a non-compliant diabetic. She cut herself, and she got gangrene, and ultimately the infection came back. And the week before, she had been in the hospital, and the week before her death, she was part of the PACE program, and the doctor at the PACE program of all-inclusive care, he called me and he's like, it was only a matter of time because the infection is going to rage through her body. And I thought, oh boy, and she had said to me, I don't want anything. I mean, again, I wasn't her healthcare proxy, my sister was, but my mother's like, I don't want anything extraordinary. And my sister had called, and my sister lived out of state at the time, and she wanted to talk to my mom, and I went to rouse my mom, and I couldn't rouse her. And so I said to my sister, I can't rouse her. And my sister was calling from out of state. And she said, I'm calling Dr. Randall. I was like, okay, well, you call Dr. Randall. You go right ahead. You call Dr. Randall. So he called me. And he's like, Liz, I can come over. I can bring the antibiotic. But this is just going to prolong her life. And, he said, I'll bring it. Right. And then she revived. My mom came, Dr. Randall came over to my house, and my mom's like, Dr. Randall, what are you doing here?
I'm perfectly fine.
I'm perfectly fine. But in a week, she was dead. And again, she had said nothing extraordinary. 2 days before she died, she fell out of the bed. And we by then my sister was present, and we just called the fire department to put her back in the bed. She had decided no more hospitals. So again, when you were describing things earlier, it wasn't horrible. We were there when she passed. She was at home. She was just reaching out her hands, and we were like, Mom, go, go. And we were able to stroke her arms, and it was just, it wasn't horrible. And I keep, because I think there was so much fear in us as human beings about the death process and how we are going to handle it for our loved ones, but also how we're going to handle our own. So and we did have hospice come to sit vigil, and we didn't know. Obviously, the hospice worker knew when she stopped breathing. My mom was on oxygen, so it was kind of like, hospice worker got up, took the morphine out of the refrigerator and left. And my sister and I and my nieces are looking at each other like, is it over? Should we turn off something? We didn't. And I think that's why having the trusted professionals that, because you feel inadequate and you feel as though you need to pull out all the stops. Right. You need to pull out all the stops, be heroic and, save,
Well, and people aren't often given options.
Right.
They're not told that it's okay to say no.
Right.
So I think that having people that are willing to say that and have the conversation is important.
Well, again, and level with you. You were talking about that before. Leveling with people and saying, yeah, if you're checking, this is what this looks like. This is what this feels like. Do you really want to subject yourself to that, or do you really want to subject your loved one to that? If that's, for what purpose? For what purpose? Right. But I know that this is part of the human condition. That we think we can live forever. We think we can perpetuate life, and so we postpone and we make excuses, and we I think to our detriment. Right. And again, anything that in my own personal life that it's kind of like, I admire people who will conquer their fears. It's it may take a while to conquer your fears, but say, this is what I'm afraid of. So let's unpack this.
Right.
And I think that's what you are doing.
Trying to do.
Exactly.
Trying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But the other part, as I'm thinking about this, is that we also pay attention to, I've talked about quality of life in terms of, people with illnesses who feel limited, they don't think they can do things anymore. One of the things, and I had mentioned this to you before we were on air, we have a thoughtful engagement program.
Yes.
Which is a very individualized engagement. We have a thoughtful engagement specialist who will meet with our clients if they want to do this program, and it doesn't have to be one of our clients. People can do just thoughtful engagement. And she will talk to them and find out who they are, who they were, what their hobbies were, what brings them joy, and figure out a way to bring that back into their life. Whether that's bringing them to movies or music performances, she can do that. She could take a ride down to the Cape. If someone sort of really wants to see the ocean again, she could do that. She has one client right now that when I referred the client to our specialist, Mary Ellen, I said, she really misses walking in the woods. She just loves being out in nature. She has some dementia. She can't go on her own. Her daughter's working, and daughter needs a little bit of respite also. Daughter, they live together. It's a lot of together time, especially when someone has dementia and is repetitive, asking the same questions or needing a lot of attention. So that's another real benefit of this program, is it creates some respite. But so we thought this was going to be a walk in the woods. And when Mary Ellen went in and talked to her, she found that what was really important to this woman was giving back to the community. And she thought that part of her life was gone because she wasn't driving anymore. How could she get places or do things? So now 2 days a week, Mary Ellen picks her up. They go to the senior center. They pick up food for Meals on Wheels, and they go to a building, and our client delivers Meals on Wheels.
That's wonderful.
She has made friends. There was one woman who loved her perfume, so the next week she made sure that she had written down what her perfume was and gave it to the woman. There was another one, the client is originally German speaking, so there's another client that lives in that particular building who every day greets them with a new German word that she's learned online. So it's really opened up her world in a way that people thought wasn't possible. And another one of her clients is someone that is living in assisted living, is essentially in bed all the time, but was a home ec teacher and had 4 kids, loved cooking, and Mary Ellen goes in with a toaster oven and they cook, and often the aides will come in from the hall because they smell what they're cooking, and she gets to entertain again. And so this is a whole, she's actually cutting things and making salads and all kinds of things. And it's something that she loved doing that you wouldn't expect the person who's bedbound to be able to do.
Sarah, this has been fascinating, and obviously so much more we could say.
Yes. We could do several of these, I think. Not for a long time.
But, wow, what a treat to have you, for us to be reacquainted and have you talk about, your new iteration. So just give a little promo before we wind up. Again, how can people reach you?
So people can reach me at the agingspacema.com, or they can call at 888-607-6027, or look for the Aging Space online and you'll find us. Awesome. Or Aging Life Care Association.
And isn't there a newsletter too?
There is a newsletter you can sign up for. We send out monthly newsletters with little articles ranging from how to manage as a step-parent family, to planning funerals, to accommodations for your home, all different kinds of things.
Awesome. So, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun. Thank you.
Join me again for another edition of Connecting the Dots.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at lizbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Lizbeth Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, J.D., LLM, in association with Compliments.